Story 1. I am a bus driver, and I try my best to catch everybody who wants to ride the bus. Sometimes that means I will wait a few seconds as someone comes running, but only when I know I have the time to do so. Our schedule is quite tight, so often I only have a couple of minutes at the end stop before I start again. If I am already 7 minutes late, I know I am going to begin the next trip at least 5 minutes behind schedule. So, I do my best to get everyone where they need to go, but sometimes I simply cannot afford to wait. I need to clear my head, stretch, and maybe drink some water between trips after all. Unfortunately, some people cannot seem to understand that a bus runs on a schedule. It is a public service, yes, but it also has to keep to a timetable. For example, just last week, as I was pulling into a stop halfway through the route, I saw a child who looked to be about 7 years old running toward the bus. So, I waited. The child ran up to me, stood with one foot in the door so I could not close it, and asked, "Could you wait for my mom? She's just around the corner." Who can say no to a child? Especially a polite one. So, I waited. I looked around. I checked my mirrors. Still, there was no mother. I asked the child, "Are you sure she's coming for this bus?" The child nodded and confirmed, still standing there with one foot in the door. Seconds turned into minutes, and I could sense the other passengers growing restless. So, I said to the child, "I'm sorry, but I cannot wait any longer. The next bus will be here in less than 10 minutes, so you will not have to wait long." But the child still did not move. They just stood there looking toward the corner, waiting for their mom. Another minute passed, and then another, before the mother finally appeared. She came strolling toward the stop at a very relaxed pace, almost casually, while pushing a stroller and talking on her phone. She made no effort to hurry. When she reached the bus, she continued her phone conversation as she struggled to get the stroller on board with just one hand. By the time she and the child were finally settled, I had been stuck at the stop for a full 6 minutes. One of the passengers, bless him, decided to politely tell the mother that this was not acceptable. She attempted to dismiss him by gesturing that she was on the phone. That only made things worse because other passengers quickly joined in, raising their voices in frustration. At that point, I had no choice but to stop the bus completely, leave my seat, and step in before the situation turned into chaos. I calmly told the mother that next time she should simply go directly to the stop and wait, because buses come every 10 minutes. I explained that she would not have to wait long, and she responded by saying that life with children makes it hard to plan. Yes, it does. But still. By the end of it all, I had lost so much time that I did not even get a chance to stretch, clear my head, or drink any water between trips. Story 2. Throughout the year, I had noisy and thoughtless neighbors. They would often have loud parties that would go to the early hours of the morning. They were all in university and of Indian descent. This becomes important later on. I had called the police, called the apartment manager. Nobody would do anything about it. I was losing sleep, and my work was becoming affected as well. I had spoken to them directly, and they completely disregarded me and refused to just shut the heck up. This went on for months, and I was writing out my lease to move somewhere else. One day, I'm sitting watching TV on a nice spring day, and I have my windows wide open, and I hear one of the neighbor's friends come over, and he asks if he's coming out, and he says no, he needs to study for an important test he's taking the next day. This little snippet of information was all I needed. His friend leaves, and he closes the door. I then proceeded to take my speakers and put them up against the walls, near where I knew his desk was. There were balconies outside, so I often saw him studying here, and I began to blare Merzbow and death metal straight at the wall. I put on my noise-canceling headphones and just blasted it as loud as possible for hours. My landlord actually ended up coming into the apartment because I didn't hear him knocking, and he's obviously flipping out. But I'm like, "Well, you never did anything when I complained, so good luck. Call the cops." My lease was set to be up soon anyway, and I was leaving the state, so screw y'all. So landlord leaves, and I'm still amped up on adrenaline, and it's quiet for maybe 20 minutes, and I just intermittently start blasting music. The neighbor comes over irate, screaming that he has this big test, and he's got to pass it, apparently a medical student, and I just laughed in his face and said, "I don't hear anything." He then makes a fantastic mistake, which was telling me he didn't just have a final tomorrow, but it was finals week. Oh great, added stress for the week equal sign, the fact that I continue doing this every night for the rest of the week. I set my alarm to go off every 30 minutes, and I would bang on the walls with a hammer and blast music, and I was going a bit crazy as well, but that didn't matter because I was screwing up this guy's life. Around day 3 of no sleep for anyone, he comes over screaming about how in India his family will disown him and all this nonsense, which just made me laugh and just said the same thing over and over, that I didn't hear the music, and I think it was coming from somewhere else. I basically just started gaslighting him, acting really nice when he came over in a rage. That weekend the landlord gave some crappy notice that I had to leave, which I was fine with, because he broke my lease and I wanted to get out anyway, so I got my deposit back. On the last morning I was there, I was moving out, and I knocked on the jerk's neighbor's door at like 8 a.m. and asked him if he wanted this old air conditioner I was going to throw out otherwise. He was totally in a daze, and I don't know if he really understood what was happening any longer. Anyway, hopefully I screwed up his life a bit. Should have shut the heck up when I told him numerous times. Story 3. So, this had been a difficult time for the family, mentally, even though now it is a joke that we use to tease my mom. This was around 15 years ago. We had moved to a new housing complex. This was a newly constructed space and families had just started to move in. There was this family of 3, consisting of 22M and his parents, who moved in few months later. It started off as a friendly neighbor vibes. I used to get along with the son and his parents and mine used to get along. Now it turned out that the son was the only decent human being in this family. He got married and went abroad within 3 years of moving here. I guess that's enough of a backstory, and I will jump into the meat of it. All the below-mentioned events happened across a time span of 10 years. The lady in this family was the most entitled person I have seen, and she thought that my mom was here to just serve her family. I think my mom also went along as the lady was one of the few friends that she had here. My mom is a homemaker, and so she didn't have any friends outside the housing complex. It started with she coming to our house around the time lunch was being prepared. She would start by telling how weak she is to do any household work, and she will have to go back and prepare food for her family in this weakened state. Hearing to her sobbing story, my mom used to give lunch to her. This used to happen maybe once every 2 weeks, which evolved into thrice a week occurrence as time went by. This then evolved into she ordering food from her home, and my mom used to take it to her home. Whenever they went to their hometown and came back, my mom used to offer food for one time, as they do not have to cook right afterwards. This voluntary offers evolved into expectations and then ordering around as well. As time went by, she used to call my mom a couple of days before they would be coming back from a travel to order food to be prepared for her family. My dad, me and my sis, we knew what kind of human being she is. But for some reason my mom couldn't see that aspect of her. She used to be pushed around by this lady as her personal staff. This led to many fights within us and my mom. However, things went back to how it was and never improved. My dad used to get a free bottle of whiskey every 3 months from a friend of his who was in the military. When this lady learned about this, she said to my mom to ask my dad to give her husband few whiskey bottles as well. Again, my mom thought there was nothing wrong in this ask. Now this was not a poor family. Both son and dad in this family were earning good. In fact, at this time only my dad was earning in our family. We used to have some difficult times, but most of the time we were comfortable with the basic needs being met. Speaking about difficult times, one time my dad was falling short for my engineering college fees. My mom suggested to ask this family for a loan. When my dad asked them, they said that he can loan the amount for a day and would need it back after that. My dad declined this, and luckily he got a temporary reprieve from a relative, which he paid back in a month. All this after everything that they took from us. The silver lining was that this event started to cure my mom's blindness towards their behavior. She also came to know from various sources that the lady was bad-mouthing my mom's cooking to everyone. She also had the audacity to do it once in front of my mom, making her feel embarrassed. This added to the recovery process. The final nail came when my mom and sis had to travel to our hometown, leaving me and my dad for a few weeks. My mom expected that the lady would return favor by giving us food. It turned out she ghosted us for the entirety of the time my mom was away. If she saw us anywhere, she would turn around, making it look like she never saw us. This cured my mom completely. Mom realized that she had been just enabling this lady and her entitlement. She confronted the lady with all these things and then set up boundaries. She never ever gave them any meal or help of any kind. The other family permanently moved to their hometown few years back, and the last we heard, the lady and her brother got into a big fight, and he barricaded the only way between their houses. Even her own family doesn't like having her around, it seems. Story 4. I read a few stories on here, and it reminded me of an incident that occurred years ago dealing with 2 dogs my older sister acquired from a friend. At the time, I was working 2 jobs and staying with my sister. Since it was her place, she could do as she pleased when it came to having animals. She had taken in a female Cocker Spaniel named Mercy and her 5-month-old puppy. She got the dogs from her friend with the agreement that if the dogs did not work out, the friend would take them back. Mercy and her puppy were purebred and unfortunately the result of breeding between close relatives. I have never agreed with anyone who thinks it is a good idea to breed animals in that way. The result is often purebred animals with medical or behavioral problems. It was obvious that Mercy and her puppy were the product of several generations of poor breeding practices due to the behavior they displayed. My sister had just acquired the dogs, and immediately they were using the inside of the house as a toilet. What was strange was that all meals were timed, and they were fed twice a day at specific times with measured amounts according to their weight and age. You could take them out and walk them for 2 hours, and I am not exaggerating when I say that the second they were brought back inside, they would relieve themselves on the floor. My sister finally decided to put the dogs on the enclosed porch to better control bathroom training. The porch was huge, and she had a large doghouse set up for them to stay in for shelter. It was nice because if they did have an accident, it was easy to clean. This was in the middle of spring, and she would have them out there during the day. It did not get cold where we live, and she was hoping to break them out of the habit of making a mess all over the house. When my sister got off work, the dogs were brought inside and closely monitored. Our dad would also come by and help since he had nothing better to do. Plus, my sister would always treat him to his favorite coffee and cake. The routine was that the dogs would eat in the morning and then go for a 30-minute walk before being put on the porch for 5 hours. My sister would come home for lunch and repeat the process, hoping to break the bad habit. Food and water were restricted to help encourage them to go to the toilet outside. The entitled neighbor across the street would stand there staring and shaking his head, acting like this was the most horrible thing he had ever seen. A week later, I was on my way to work when I saw an animal control vehicle blocking me in. I saw the door open, and a short, overweight woman with thick glasses approached the porch. I came out. "Can I help you?" I asked. "Yes, I just received a complaint about animal abuse going on here," she said loudly. "Excuse me? I don't know what you are talking about." "Really? Then why are those 2 dogs being left on your porch?" The animal control officer decided to go inside the porch without permission and saw Mercy and her puppy resting in the doghouse, chewing on toys. They were not chained and were free to move around the enclosed porch. "Look at this. This is cruel. Dogs that are kept outside require access to food and water at all times," she exclaimed. "First, these animals have been fed and watered. Second, both dogs are not chained. Third, I believe you are referring to livestock. And last, if that is the law, then I need you to show me where it states that we are required to do so," I responded. "I could take these animals right now," she threatened. "First, These animals are in the middle of potty training, which is why they are kept on this porch during the day for a few hours and then brought in at night. Second, you are trespassing. You need to leave now, I demanded. Before she could say anything, my dad pulled up since he lived just down the street from my sister. He got out and immediately confronted the animal control officer. The best part was that he sounded exactly like Christopher Walken, except with a huge biker beard, and he was furious. He chased the officer back into her vehicle with his words. "I've had it with you. Get out of here now. I am going to be talking to your boss. You have a lot of nerve," he yelled. I finally got to work late, while my dad stayed back to inform my sister of what had happened. The animal control officer's supervisor knew my dad and later apologized for the incident. My dad explained the entire situation, and yes, what we were doing was completely legal and allowed. There was no harm being done to the dogs in any way, and my sister was simply trying to train them. Animal control would not be bothering us in the future. The dogs remained, and apparently our entitled neighbor was horrified that animal control did not do anything. It became very obvious with the nasty, scowling stares from him and his wife. 2 days later, my sister came home to find that the dogs were gone. Someone had taken them, and she was extremely upset. She was convinced that the entitled neighbor had taken them, but she had no proof. About 5 days went by, and then, almost magically, the dogs were sitting there on the porch again as if they had never left. Not long after, we saw the entitled neighbor and his wife, both looking frustrated, arguing with a carpet cleaning company in their driveway about dog mess inside their house. From what we overheard, it sounded like the two of them had not bothered to clean up after the dogs and were expecting the cleaner to do it. But he refused. I clearly remember the cleaner saying that they needed to remove the waste themselves first, and then he would be more than happy to clean the carpets. My dad and I could not stop laughing when we realized that the dogs had completely ruined the carpets in the neighbor's house. The two of them must have given the dogs access to food and water around the clock, and since what goes in must come out, the result was a complete disaster. The dogs did not seem to have an off switch when it came to food and water. If you did not limit their intake, they would eat and drink non-stop, which usually led to them getting sick and making a mess everywhere. Both dogs had all their shots and no parasites, but we were convinced that they were not right in the head because of the historic inbreeding. My sister eventually gave up and returned the dogs to her friend. No matter what we tried to do to train them to go outside, nothing worked. Fortunately, my sister owned a professional carpet shampoo machine, so despite everything, her carpets at least stayed very clean. The last straw came when Mercy refused to walk on a leash and ended up biting my sister hard enough to draw blood. We suspected that the entitled neighbor might have done something to make the dogs act worse, but truthfully, they were not in a good mental state from the start. Mercy even became aggressive toward her own puppy, and we had to separate them. In the end, my sister's friend took them back and placed them on a farm, which worked much better for the dogs. Here is where things got even more unbelievable. The neighbor and his wife, both looking smug, actually showed up at my sister's door demanding that she pay for the damages to their carpet. Imagine this. First, they called animal control about the dogs. Then, they took the dogs without permission. And now, they wanted my sister to pay for the mess their own actions caused. There was absolutely no way that was happening, and my dad wasted no time telling them to get lost. "You're going to pay for this. Look at what your dogs did," the wife yelled, shoving pictures in our faces of what looked like a complete disaster inside their house. It was truly nasty. "What is wrong with you two? You are thieves. You better get out now," my dad shouted back at them. Then, to make sure they got the message, he grabbed the garden hose and sprayed the two of them off the property while yelling, "Yeah, you like that? Thief." The neighbors ran back to their house and stayed away after that. For the next year, they continued giving us dirty looks whenever they saw us, but for the most part, they finally left us alone. Story 5. So, I am a 36-year-old male, and I got into some trouble 15 years ago. I take full responsibility for this, and even to this day, I carry all the shame, guilt, and embarrassment for it. Also, this might come up, it is not related to culture or religion. It is simply about the shame it brought to the family name. The situation began when I was 19 years old. My identification card was stolen and used in another state, which created a situation where my driver's license was suspended nationwide. Somehow, any and all notifications from the other state never made it to me. I started doing everything necessary to try and fix the problem. However, I also had a couple of tickets in my current state that I needed to pay, but couldn't because I had to pay my rent and keep my apartment. At the same time, my full-time job was having problems and was on the verge of shutting down. To try and make ends meet, I was doing a lot of freelance work as well. Again, this was my fault. I knew the company was in trouble, but I was still holding out hope that things would get better. I thought that with a couple more freelance jobs, I would finally be able to pay the tickets. This was never the case, and long story short, I was arrested and spent 2 weeks in jail. Not ideal, but in the long run, it worked out for the best by clearing the tickets in my home state. However, my family felt otherwise, and I was completely disowned because of this. I lost everything and everyone. The only reason I still had my apartment was because I had enough to cover rent, and the freelance work kept me afloat. It took another 6 months, but I was finally able to get the other state to release my driver's license. I decided that since my family hated me, I didn't need them. So a year later, I changed my last name, my phone number, and my email. My social media accounts are locked down so tightly that you would think I was guarding national security secrets. I was able to finish college, get settled into my career, and at this point, I am happier than I have ever been. Fast forward to the present, and 2 weeks ago, there was a knock on my door. It was my mom and dad. Again, it had been 15 years, and I hadn't spoken to them not a single word. The only thing I could get out of my mouth was, "How did you find me, and what are you doing here?" My mom's response was, $5,000 to a private investigator. Finally, a search of Facebook with just your first name found you, and the investigator confirmed it was you. I responded, "You didn't answer my second question. What are you doing here?" My mom replied again, "It's been 15 years. Looking at where you are, it seems you have learned your lesson, and you are succeeding. You've missed out on a lot of things." I ended with, "Yes, I have learned my lesson. One of them is that you can't expect anyone to help you or be understanding, not even your family. And yes, I did succeed, but I did it entirely without you. Please leave and don't ever come back." I shut the door in their faces, locked it, checked the back door, and closed all the curtains. I am guessing they hung around for another 15 minutes, knocking and demanding to be let in. I went back to bed, turned the fan on high, and went back to sleep. I did some research, and I have missed out on a lot. I have nieces and nephews, as well as brothers and sisters-in-law. But the truth is, I don't know any of them, and I don't think I need to. I live a very quiet life. I can count on 2 hands how many friends I actually have. One friend said I may have taken it too far, that I should have at least given my parents a chance. He said if I didn't like what they had to say, then I could have told them to go away afterward. I was hoping that would be the end of it. But now they have taken to following me around. To be completely honest, they are harmless, but they are definitely a real nuisance. I admit that I have also been toying with them a little, having some fun with the help of a friend. He now calls them fleas and will check on me by asking if I have fleas or not. It's kind of funny. If I say yes, then it's game on. The first night, he came over, and we walked downtown to a really expensive restaurant that I knew they would never go to. Another night, we went to an adult store. That one was the most entertaining of all. This past week, the way my days off lined up, I had a 5-day stretch, so I decided to go to the city for a few days. I live within walking distance of the Amtrak station, and of course, they followed me. I kept my earbuds in the whole time, and I knew they were trying to talk to me, but I ignored them completely. People on the platform even told me they were speaking to me, and I just said that I knew, but I didn't want to deal with them. When the train came, I got on and left them standing there watching me. I absolutely loved it. It got to the point where I finally had to acknowledge them, because they weren't going to go away. So, we met at the park across from my apartment. I didn't hold anything back. I told them this was the one and only time I was going to speak to them. I told them I was their judge and their jury, borrowing a page from the old Matlock series, Thank You, Olympia Lawrence. I said that as far as I was concerned, they were guilty of everything, and all I was doing was listening to what they had to say before I walked away. I asked them why, after 15 years, they suddenly wanted to be back in my life, and why they had made the decision to disown me. They told me that I had ruined the family name and that the shame I brought to the family was unbearable. They said that the only way to make things right was to remove me completely. They went on to say that recently, my name had been coming up in conversation. The family has grown with many new people, and my brother and sister-in-law were asking questions about who I am. They told me I now had a niece they thought I would love and get along with, and also a nephew who was born last year. They insisted that now should be the time to fix things. Looking at my apartment and the life I had, they said I must have learned my lesson about being a better person and managing my life more responsibly. I finally cut them off and told them that I couldn't stand to hear any more. I was at the point where I could hear my heart beating in my ears. I told them that I did everything completely by myself. Nobody from that life exists for me anymore, not one person. I said they just needed to tell everyone the truth, that I was in jail for 2 weeks, and because of that, they decided to get rid of me. I told them that I did it all on my own, and that the only person who was there for me was my cousin Jean, who is only related to me by marriage. That is the reason I took her last name. I explained that to this day, I am doing everything on my own. I rely on nobody, and I don't need or want them in any part of my life. They made their decisions, and I am making mine. I told them this would be the last time we would ever talk. I also told them that I would be going to see a lawyer to find out if there was anything I could do to keep them away from me, and that if they continued to follow me around or show up at my apartment, I would have them arrested for trespassing. After saying this, I went back home, locked everything down, pulled the curtains shut, and I have been crying ever since. Story 6. So, I 20. Female, I'm writing this at nearly 4, and because I feel like someone outside of the family and friends I have need to hear it. This happened around 10 or so years ago, but I remember it vividly even though I was young. Let's start with the backstory. My mom didn't have a job at this point in time and was looking to get out of the house. So, she decided to help out on the family farm until she got work again through the military. My mom practically grew up on this farm, even though she didn't live on it. It was her grandfather's farm that he built from practically scratch. She absolutely loved this place, even if she had to deal with my entitled great aunts. During the time that my mom was helping out, we had a renter in the house that was supposed to help feed the horses. This will be relevant later. My mom made sure the farm looked nice. She made sure tack horse gear was cleaned. She swept the barns and cleaned muck out of the stalls. There was even a point where she was using her car to drive to and from the feed supplier on her own dime and buying the food for the horses on her own dime. While she didn't have a job, because she loved the animals so much. At this time, she had an agreement with my great aunt that she didn't have to pay the board then because she was helping out so much. She would pay back what she owed in increments when she got a job. Keep this in mind later. One day, the renters were out early in the morning during the fall, near winter time. The horses were covered in fur, so we couldn't really see their bodies that well because they were covered in fur. My mom went to open a bag of feed to feed the horses. When she touched it, it was hot to the touch. So, she dumped out the bag, and there were maggots. Yes, there were maggots in the bag. She checked other bags, all warm to the touch. Come to find out, these pieces of dirt hadn't been feeding the horses the bags of oats and feed for months. When spring came around, we really saw how emaciated they were. My horse in particular hasn't gained his weight back in over a decade. His body was permanently damaged. He's fine, but it's hard for him to gain weight now. Of course, the tenants got thrown off the farm, and were threatened with shotguns and legal action if they came back. This is the South. You don't mess with someone's animals down here. Now, what does this backstory have to do with my great-aunt? This piece of crap decided that now that she doesn't have tenants, my mom had to pay up all her backboard that she owed or leave the family farm. It was over $1,000 and my mom still didn't have a job. My grandparents couldn't afford to help us, even with my grandmother trying to reason with her sister. The great-aunt felt entitled to the money because my mom had our horses here. This piece of crap went back on her word and tried to extort my mom. And when my mom decided to just leave instead, she was disowned for the second time by this particular great-aunt. Don't worry, they decided to renounce that so they could have access to me. Currently, my mom has disowned both of them. That's just the beginning of how I started to realize that my great-aunts were horrible. They were mean, nasty, and vindictive. They were even worse when I started working for them at a vet clinic. Anyways, that's my entitled aunt story. My family is a mess. Let me know if y'all want more stories like this. Edit. So I just wanted to clear a few things up. Hard to work with a character limit. My mom did not live on the farm. The board was for the 2 horses we kept on the family farm. Yes, we were charged to keep them on the farm, even when my mom was doing all the work to keep it pretty. She drove out 1 hour to the family farm a few times a week to help out grab feed from the supply store. The renters came in August-September. The thicker fur started growing within a couple months, so it was hard to tell if the horses were emaciated. We often don't ride in the colder months. We do groundwork. They were the ones who were supposed to feed the horses. Please don't claim we don't love our horses. I was a kid and I still feel guilty over it. How do you think my mom feels? We understand we messed up, but we've been working over a decade to help our horses regain and retain their weight. We also get our horses bi-monthly adjustments on their backs, so they aren't in pain. We're doing our best to make sure they live happily. Some of the horses weren't as affected from the lack of feed since they were still given hay and had somewhat decent patches of grass. Those are called easy keepers since they can gain weight easily. The hard keepers, like my horse, don't regain and retain weight easily. The great-aunt kinda got karma. Her sons hate her. Her husband sleeps in a separate room than her, and she got and beat breast cancer a few years back. So it's kinda something.